Welcome to Audiobook 365 Stories.
Madame Floriette looked very sad. Her face showed that she felt sorry for something and had been suffering. Her cheeks weren't as smooth as before, and there were dark circles under her beautiful eyes because she had cried a lot. She held the maid's arms tightly, making her feel a bit of pain, and looked at her with worry. "My son, Raymond," she said, almost crying. "Is it true? Has he been sick?" The maid gently freed herself from Madame Floriette's grasp and looked nervously at the library door. Madame Floriette followed her gaze and quickly walked toward the door as the maid replied, "Yes, madam, he has been sick for more than 2 weeks." Madame Floriette pushed the door open and went into the library. She felt relieved when she saw that nobody was there. "I only found out about it yesterday, by chance," she said quietly, her hand on her throat. Then, remembering the hours of worry and sadness, she exclaimed, "Rose, I need to see him." The maid looked worried. "Mr. Floriette is with him, madam." "Oh," Madame Floriette stifled a sob. "Poor little boy," said Rose, speaking gently. "We thought he wouldn't recover." The sad mother sat down in a chair, feeling very upset. "But the danger is gone now," Rose said softly. "The doctor says he will soon be better." Jacqueline looked at a photo of her son on the table nearby and held it close to her face. "My Raymond, my boy," she cried quietly. "He's grown so much. He looks so big and strong." "He doesn't look strong now, madam," Rose said, shaking her head. "I can't believe he almost died, and I might never have seen him again. My dear boy." The photo was wet with tears and kisses. "I wonder if he will remember me. Does he know who I am?" she asked eagerly. The maid suddenly exclaimed, "Mr. Floriette is here." Jacqueline stood up quickly, almost stumbling toward the door. Rose put her arm around her. "No, it's okay," she whispered. "I thought I heard him, but I was wrong." Jacqueline stood with her hands on her chest, and Rose watched her with pity. Rose had cared a lot for her young mistress and had seen many things during her short marriage that both husband and wife hadn't noticed. It took Jacqueline a few moments to recover from the shock enough to speak. "My heart is pounding," she said, breathing heavily. And after a pause, she added, "What will he say to me? But I don't care. I just want him to forgive me so I can stay with my son. If he refuses to see me, I don't know what I'll do." "Rose, Rose," she cried sadly, leaning on the maid's shoulder. "I'm scared." Rose comforted Jacqueline and gently suggested, "Wouldn't it be better to write to Mr. Floriette, madam? He doesn't expect you, and you know how easily he gets angry." "I have written to him. I've written 3 letters in the past 3 weeks, but he hasn't replied to any of them." "He didn't read them," Rose said quietly. Jacqueline sobbed again, but then she straightened up, determined. "I have to see him." "I will see him," she said loudly, her voice sounding strange. "He can't judge me without hearing me out. He used to love me a little. He has to listen to me now. Does he ever talk about me?" The maid sadly shook her head. "No, madam. Never." Jacqueline repeated weakly. "No, madam." Jacqueline turned away, crying in despair. "What did he say? What did he do when I left? Do you remember?" Rose shuddered, remembering. "I'll never forget it. He was so upset. He stayed in his room for days and refused to see anyone. Once, he left and was gone for a whole day. I listened outside his door, and I heard him crying. I was so scared that despite his orders, I went into his room. It was evening, and he was sitting by the fire, burning your letters and photos. Tears were running down his face. Jacqueline listened, her face pale. As Rose talked about her husband's sadness, a spark of hope suddenly made her feel dizzy and weak. He had loved her a lot, after all. Maybe he still loved her a little. She hadn't lost everything. The boy helped him, I believe, Rose said, but Jacqueline hardly heard her. He wouldn't let him out of his sight, day or night. Then Mr. Floriat started to calm down and focused on his work again. He worked a bit harder than before, that's all. Then we moved here, she added. Jacqueline looked at Rose, feeling calmer than she had since arriving at the house. Rose, I have to see him, she said firmly. Go and tell him that a lady wants to talk to him, but don't let him know who it is. But, please, Rose, I'm begging you. The maid shook her head uncertainly, but then with a resigned sigh, she went out to deliver the message. Jacqueline, her knees shaking, sank into a chair and tried to calm herself for the difficult conversation ahead. When she returned, she hadn't expected forgiveness because she hadn't believed her husband truly loved her. But hearing Rose's story of his grief had given her hope, and now her emotions were overwhelming. Jacqueline wasn't naturally wicked. She had experienced the torment of feeling fallen while still seeing herself as virtuous. Wickedness makes people cold-hearted, but she had been lively, witty, fond of laughter, and emotional. Without love, as she understood it, she felt incomplete. She had adored her husband, but eventually felt she was giving more than she received. She didn't understand the heart of her quiet, hard-working husband. Her pride was hurt, and because of it, she made mistakes that led to her being separated from her husband and son. Her son. For 2 years, she had thought of little else, dreaming of the moment when she could hold him close to her. Surely, even her stern husband, who had once loved her, wouldn't deny her the right of a mother to be with her child when he was sick. He had to allow her to live where she could see her son sometimes and watch him grow up. She held the photograph and kissed it passionately over and over. "Oh, my love, my dear boy," she whispered tearfully. "If it weren't for you, I—" A nearby door opened quietly, and her husband entered the room.